Well, welcome back, everyone, to an inquiry series with Michelle Terrill-Heath. And today we're going to talk about one of my favorite topics, which is resilience and connection. And Michelle, in your latest Substack, you had mentioned this story that just really inspired you about P22, this mountain lion in Griffith Park. Do you want to just tell us, like, how did you come across this story and why did it inspire you?
Yeah, thank you, Sky. So I was listening to the radio randomly, and it happened to be an NPR, the National Public Radio station, and they had a story about P22. And I'm like, what's
Funny name.
P22?
I know, it's a funny name, right?
Yeah,
P22. Does the P
P22.
stand does the P stand for anything? Did you figure that out? P
Puma, I think.
Oh, Puma, because it's a mountain lion. Oh, okay.
I think so. And so, but I'm not 100% sure, but that's what I think. And the story just captivated me in particular, about this mountain lion who all the other lions like, died because they couldn't cross the freeways or there was no territory left for them. They're being encroached upon their land and their territory, and I guess what's very interesting is when a mountain lion male becomes of a certain age, they have to leave their home and find their own territory. That's
Sounds
just part of the
sounds almost
mountain
human.
lion way.
Sounds kinda
So
human as well. Leave
yeah.
the nest, get out of here, and go find your family, you know?
So they they tracked P22 back, and they knew he came from the Santa Monica Mountains and that he was a kit there and, had a mother and did the whole thing. But he, unlike other young male lions, he had the wherewithal to cross over a ton of human territory and find his way. He had the persistence to find his way to Griffith Park, which isn't ideal. It's an 80 acre, it's pretty small for a mountain
Those
lion,
yeah.
but it was big enough. And he made his home there for over a decade. And, you know, and when I listened to this story, they were mostly wildlife biologists. So they were scientists who were telling the story. And it enchanted me, of course, as a person who loves narrative and analogy
And nature
and
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 nature.
nature. And I kind of got very inspired because at the end they were saying that without connection, there can be no resilience, and that P22 probably died because he had no connection.
Right.
He said he was sick and he did die of some injuries. He probably did get hit by a car at some point. But that just really struck me. And I started thinking about resilience with disease and resilience with being a caregiver and resilience with, young people, you included having, personal and life struggles that just come along that to everybody. And I started thinking about my book and how I start my little video saying, do you ever wonder why some people, seem to thrive and be happy no matter what comes their way?
Right.
And I think resilience is one of those reasons.
Absolutely, and I was gonna go into that too, so thanks for jumping on the gun there. So it is an interesting question because we made it this far, you in the book, Your Wildest Dreams, it's full of all of these places where you could have also stopped existing, right? And resilience is sort of that, like, how do we rebound from a fire or losing our family or having a disease, you know? And so it's an interesting idea, and when I read the Substack, what was came out most for me in this question you said, "Have you ever wondered how people live happy even though they have horrible circumstances?" And I think about that myself too, being in foster care most of my life, and of course, being adopted by you and the family helped me survive. But, it is interesting if we ask ourselves, how am I here today through all of the challenges? And I think what the Substack really got to me is like, I'm actually here because of connection for sure.
Yeah.
100% that came out. And so maybe what I'd like to ask you a little bit about is for those people who feel maybe disconnected and might be failing, because there might be people out there who are feeling like they're, especially right now, right? Resilience right now is the topic of our time because we've got wars going on. People might be listening to this in all kinds of situations where they feel like they can't make it tomorrow. How do you connect? What kind of connections from the Substack, what I read, are like, how do you connect in a way that helps you become more resilient?
Yeah. I would say When when I felt disconnected from things, and I would say when to anybody who's listening who feels disconnected or feels like they don't have connections or feels isolated, I guess all those are very similar. Um, I think the best way to begin finding connection is to recognize the vast amount of subjects that make up who we are, and to recognize that we are huge, we are expansive, we are full of so many different subjects. And so, for instance, right now, politically in our country, we're very polarized, is the word most people are using. So I could one of my very closest friends and people in my family are not on the same wavelength as me politically, and I could feel very disconnected from them. What I have to remind myself is that my politics, although they're representative of values and other things, they're only one tiny part of who I am. One tiny, tiny part.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
And so, what I need to do, and what I would recommend to anybody, is to really go into a meditative state, a quiet state, and examine all the parts of you that you can identify. And, you may have not um, developed those parts. Some people, I think, are very much interested in having creative art be part of their life or music, and they've been busy, working at something to serve the purpose of supporting themselves and not developed those parts. So to me, it's a matter of looking into yourself, looking inward first and examining what's there. What parts of you are there? And then allowing those parts to come bubble up to the surface and see where you can connect. And it can be a simple, simple thing. I don't mean like, oh my gosh, I'm a repressed artist, so I'm gonna go, drop everything and go make art. I mean, you know, if you're feeling disconnected, it's usually because you're disconnected from yourself in some way.
wow, that's so powerful right there. Can you say
So
it again? Say that one more
yeah.
time.
So if you're feeling disconnected, it's usually because you're disconnected from some part of yourself in some way. And so if I'm if I'm looking, I'm just going to give the example of art because it's an easy one for me. If I spent my life, excuse me, as an accountant, and now I'm realizing that I'm feeling alone, lonely, isolated. Maybe I go to the community college and sign up for a painting class or something.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say.
You
That's
know, it's a
it
simple thing. If
yeah.
if you're feeling like you're really disconnected, Sky, one of the things that I know this will resonate with you, but all over, if you don't have a pet, all over there's dogs that need walking.
Mhm.
And there's an interesting thing that happens when you connect with an animal
Yeah,
is suddenly the parts of yourself that have been a little repressed come out.
that's right.
So I would recommend people look inward, see what parts of themselves that they're not e able to express or haven't developed that they want to, and then take tiny steps towards that.
Yeah, I love that, Michelle, and of course, in the article too, you mentioned, connection is as important, as food and water and shelter, and of course, we've had this Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which I oftentimes get into debates with because I find people who don't have some people who don't have food and in a shelter, like in different places in the world, like India and Africa, are actually so much more able to be self-actualized and self-realized because they are connecting with their local community and sharing more. But I would say in this day and age where people feel hyper connected on social media and LinkedIn and everything, that probably that what you're saying right now is the most important. Like tune into what you really could connect around, right? Like a dog or like something community like art or um, yeah, I mean, when people like I moved to Amsterdam, right? And it's hard to connect to people, but for me, it was a little bit easier because my work, right? My work has to do with impact and your work has to do with like healing and helping as well. And so for us, it's a little easier to connect because we find other people that we our vibe attracts our tribe in a sense. So that's really easy for us. But for someone out there who's looking to connect, doesn't know how, new country, new situation, I think, yeah, getting into a hobby, finding something that speaks to your soul. I love communities like church. I know that, church can be a great place. For me, it was a great place. For you, it's been a great place, I think. Um, I think the hardest part about connection, though, and this is going to go tie back into resilience in a second, is how we connect authentically, because you have challenged me so much to connect authentically with people and to be very honest about my situation so that I can meet people and they can meet me where we really are. So
Yeah.
can you speak to that? And then maybe we can round off this conversation about why that would make you more resilient to connect authentically rather than to connect superficially.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I wanna say I haven't really connected at church.
No, I meant like, you grew up
But
in a
spiritually,
family.
like
Yeah,
nature,
spirit.
church, or that type
That's
of
right.
thing.
Thanks for clarifying.
But I will say also that church is a great place. My grandmother lived to 90, almost 93, and church was a major place of connection for her, uh, with friends and people who loved her and she loved.
Yeah.
I wanna say that one more thing, a little bit of a thing with the connection scientifically, they're really talking about being able to procreate with the P22.
Right. Okay.
So I just wanna say for the sake of accuracy that we're taking this very broadly
Right.
because in a nature wildlife biologist, connection means having other creatures around like you so that you can
Mate.
procreate.
Mate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mate,
Mating.
procreate.
Talking about mating. It's spring. Everyone loves to mate.
Yeah. Uh, and in our sense, I'm taking it much further, but I'm gonna say that in a human sense, we are complicated creatures. And I think sometimes we forget that we're part of nature. And the connection that we need to make, as you were bringing up, has to resonate with our authenticity, the authentic part of who we are. And that's what I meant by going inward first. If
Yeah.
you're feeling lonely, isolated, separated, uh, even depressed in a dangerous way, you gotta go inward first and you've gotta look at yourself. And even even if you can find one little tiny piece that is interesting to you, that catches you, or look back in your childhood. A lot of times people are surprised if they have run into a teacher from a long ago, a grammar school, elementary school teacher, and the teacher might say, "Oh, you were the most amazing singer in our whole group." And you're like, "Wow, I haven't been singing for 25 years or something." So I think it's looking inward. I think it's looking backwards a little bit and looking at finding your authentic self, and then being willing to take a step to put that self in the world. Because I do believe, Sky, like you were saying, how you and I, like, what did you say? The vibe attracts the tribe. I love that.
Exactly. Yeah.
Um, I think that's true for everybody, but everybody doesn't have the situation. They haven't created the situation where they're actually doing work that is part of who they are,
Yeah.
that they do love, or they're actually doing hobbies is a tough word because it sort of diminishes it.
Yeah.
Um, but I don't mean it in a diminished way.
It does, because one thing that came up right now is the fact if you are in survival mode, which we're talking about,
Yeah.
and so if you're in a moment of crisis,
Yeah.
it is a little bit harder to connect. And I think a lot of us pull back from connection when we're in crisis. And so I guess what's amazing to understand is that we have to go inward to understand, like, hey, in order to survive this shitstorm, we
Yeah.
need to find a way to connect with others, to get out of our own way in a sense of isolation, right? So that we can find others to connect with that will help, that we can help them.
Yeah.
There's so much about connection that just is awesome. And I like you said,
And I have a quick story that might be a good way to almost
round.
close.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
that close.
Well, but a dear friend of ours who's now in his 70s, but I met him when he was 26, and he is a Vietnam veteran, and when he was 19, he was a helicopter pilot and got his leg shot off. And so he got immediately retired, sent back to the States, lived on he has a pension forever, and has one leg, not two. And he has a prosthetic, and He's actually quite a pioneer in a lot of different things, but he was sharing with me years and years ago how horribly victimized he felt and how sorry for himself he felt that at age 19 he had no leg.
Hmm.
And really, at that time, he had a big old prosthetic leg thing, and he liked in the summertime to wear shorts. And he said moms would turn their children away, like, don't look at that. Like, he felt ugly and kind of like a pariah. And he said he felt very victimized and very sad and very isolated until he started he finally started going to some support groups. And I know support groups can have ups and downs. So I'm not this isn't a plug for support groups. But in this case, he went to a support group and he met all these other people who had become amputees for some reason or another.
Hmm.
And he met a young woman who was only 18, and she had driven a car in California up to a lake up in the mountains and was just going for a swim by herself in this lake at age 18. And an airplane, a small private airplane, was having trouble and ended up crashing and landing on her and cutting off her foot while she was swimming in this lake.
Wow.
And I met this woman, and she was living her life. She had a prosthetic foot, and my friend said that when he started meeting people who had had all these random things, he started realizing that he wasn't really a picked on victim. The universe wasn't picking on him. Things happen. And suddenly he became inspired to connect, not just with other amputees, but to connect in the world and to make an opportunity. And at that time, he took his fake leg that mothers apparently were turning their children away from, and he had the symbol of Mickey Mouse
Mhm.
pictured on his wooden leg
That's so
as
cute.
a way of kind of making it more accessible for not to freak out kids, but like to make it a little more gentle.
Right.
And so I think that that's a really good example of, sometimes things will just come to you. I'm not sure what motivated him to go to this particular support group, but he said as soon as he met that young woman, it just hit him like this stuff just happens. It happens all the time. And if I'm going to spend my life, I need to connect with people.
And, that really raised for me the idea, the difference that Brené Brown has brought to our attention a lot, which is that fitting in is the opposite of belonging. Fitting in
Yes.
requires you to really change yourself and to fit in with 2 legs rather than 1 per your story, which can make you feel very isolated. But
Yeah.
belonging is really coming as you are and knowing that you'll find people who will also connect with you where you're at and meet you where you're at, per your conversation with your friend who doesn't share your political views, but where you guys are obviously connecting on other levels. And I think lastly, think about all the things that we do have in survival, food, shelter, all those things do connect us. We can connect around a meal. We can connect in any type of shelters we have around us, community centers, churches, all that I mentioned before. So there are a lot of things to reach for connection because it seems to be the key to resilience, and we need that more than ever right now. Can you just leave our listeners really quickly about what resilience has meant for you personally? Like what that means to survive something and to come out of it on the other end and what that feels like?
Yeah. Resilience for me, the meaning of resilience is also the meaning that I take of resilience, the standard meaning, which means that you can survive and thrive when very hard things come to you. And I think that the very first part of surviving and thriving is having that intention. And if you don't even know that that's a possibility, you're not going to be able to have that intention. So
That's
if
a
you can
uh,
understand that, like, almost anything can occur, and I'm not trying to trivialize, it can be something absolutely horrible or it can be something that's just horrible for you in your moment. Um, and you can survive and thrive that. And if you can take that in, if we can all take that in as a truth in life, sort of like that, um, we know that if you throw a ball up in the air, it will come down because there's gravity. If we can take that as a truth in our lives and go with that, I think we'll all be able to connect with to connect with other things and people and experiences that will create the resilience we need to survive and thrive the things that come our way.
Awesome. The CDC has a statistic about diseases out there. It says that there's not one disease in all of the world that has a 100% fatality rate. And in all the five extinctions that we've had on the planet, life has always found a way to prevail and come back. So I'll just leave you guys with that little thought there.
Love that, Sky. Thank you so much.
Thank you guys for listening. Be sure to check out Your Wildest Dreams, A Parkinson's Love Story with Michelle. Thank you for joining us in the Inquiry series, where we just kind of dive deep and talk about these things on the cuff and on the fly. Authentically, we're connecting with you, and you can connect with us on Facebook, on LinkedIn, on Instagram, online, anywhere, and on YouTube, Substack, where you can actually have conversations with Michelle on her topics like this one we're having today. So thanks again.